Today we're going to be talking about an atheist science teacher who made a shocking discovery that led him to Christ. Is it shocking enough to lead us to Christ? Well, I guess we'll see. So let's watch the video and see what he has to say for himself.
There wasn't one thing that made me an atheist. It's just a compilation of so many behaviors of other people, attitudes, poor attitudes, seeing the world as a whole and all the negative behaviors and how we treat each other.
Already off to a fantastic start. What's better to make someone an atheist than the negative behaviors of other people instead of rationality and reason and logic and science?
Made me think there is no such thing as this great God that everybody professes to believe in, because if he was so great, why do I see all this pain and suffering and hypocrisy?
Now, that's fine. Like, the pain problem is a big one. I mean, the problem of evil is a big problem for Christianity that remains unsolved, despite 2,000 years of attempts to solve it. If God is so great, why then is there so much suffering in the world? It's a great question. However, I mean, there are less great questions involved here, like, for example, the hypocrisy. I guess you could say, in a sense, that if Christians are hypocritical, like in a majority of cases, which, let's be honest, they are, then that's a problem for Christianity from the point of view that if someone really has divine revelation, rules sent to them from God about how to be a good person, if someone really follows Christ, who they believe is our Savior, they should probably have something that atheists don't. And yet, I can't really think of any Christians that are significantly better people than me. Not to say I'm a fantastic person myself. I have problems just like everybody else. But what I'm saying is, they should be on another level if they're truly connected to the divine. Frankly, I do consider that to be generally less of a problem than the problem of evil. But overall, not terrible points. Let's just he's not making terrible points currently. But I do question this narrative because there is a difference between being an atheist and thinking other people suck.
All around me. Looking back on it, I just realized that every time it was brought up, I was excited to try and break down the God that they believed in. Because you ask me a scientific question about it, I can give you a somewhat valid scientific answer. And I think at that point, that's what led me to atheism, because
what if you're talking to Catholics? Because, Catholics don't really have much of a problem with science. I mean, Catholics, the Catholic Church at least, I don't know about a majority of Catholics in general, but the Catholic Church says evolution is real. The Catholic Church says the Big Bang really happened. The Catholic Church, in the current era at least, is very much pro-science. So why is that a problem? Now, granted, I do think it's kind of stretching things a little bit, or actually quite a lot, but I don't really see a problem with it. So if your whole thing is, well, science disproves God, then I think you are wrong. Because there are plenty of people who believe in gods, all kinds of gods, that still accept science. Here's a fun fact that a lot of people don't realize. You know Iran, that theocratic nightmare country? Well, you might think they ban evolution from schools, like Turkey does. But no, in fact, the teaching of evolution is mandatory in Iranian schools. Isn't that a fun fact? I bet you didn't know that, did you?
it was a very easy stance to take. As an atheist, you're alone. I mean, you really are, because you've almost isolated yourself, not because people have pushed you away, because you've almost built walls around you.
This sounds like a you problem, my guy. Listen, I've been surrounded by Christians my whole life, and yes, we have our differences, very significant ones. I've been surrounded by fundamentalists. My whole family, save my nephew, are deranged fundamentalists, and I guess my biological father too, but we don't talk. But other than that, my whole family is just fundamentalist Christians. I don't feel isolated. I love my family. I love being around them. I mean, I watch Star Trek with my mom. What's nerdier than that? I talk to my dad all the time about religion and politics and everything in between. I love my sister. She's really great. She's a really great person all around. Love her to death. And so on and so forth. I mean, what makes being an atheist that isolating necessarily is probably just, you. I hate to say it, like, yes, it is tough being an atheist in a country, in a culture of Christianity. It is difficult. But I don't think it has to be isolating necessarily, not based on that alone. You can still have good relations with people all across the spectrum. And you don't have to agree with them on everything. I mean, you can argue with them about religion even. They'll do it. I've had plenty of arguments with my own family over it. We're still good. You don't have to isolate yourself by being an atheist.
because you think everybody is intrinsically evil and things are just going through chaos theory, that everything's leading towards a demise, and there's
Isn't it Christians who kind of think that everybody is inherently evil? I mean, there is the original sin concept found in Christianity. Atheists don't have an original sin. You know, we don't have that. I tend to think myself that people are fundamentally good. Regardless of where I've been in life, whether it's New York City or California or Kentucky or Amtrak trains through, the entire country, I've met a lot more good people than bad people. People just trying their best. And yeah, sometimes they suck. We all do. But that doesn't make them bad people. That just means they kind of suck sometimes, just like everybody else.
nothing you can do to stop it. So why be happy? Why revel in that? So that's really where I was.
Why be happy? Well, because it doesn't really help you to be miserable about everything. Now, if you're depressed, then that's a chemical imbalance, isn't it? So you do need some help for that. But why be sad? Why be depressed? I'm a pretty happy person, and I've got just enormous number of problems. I'm not always happy. I get depressed too sometimes over my problems, but you don't have to be like that necessarily. You can get help, and that is a thing we will be returning to in this video.
When I started going to church, and I have no problem saying this, I went kicking and screaming with my wife. And at the time, it was because we wanted to create a better life and environment for our daughter.
Okay, a couple things here. I mean, the first thing is, my wife is a Catholic, and I love my wife. Really, really adore this woman more than life itself. If she tried to drag me into a church knowing I don't like churches, instant divorce. That's just how it is. And she knows. I've told her as much. So she's not going to do that. She thankfully is not going to do that. I mean, I don't think Catholics are going to generally try to convert people against their will currently. I mean, in the past it may have been different, but I don't think they're doing that whole thing now. The next thing is the first really, really curious thing that he says here, because he says he was an atheist, but he took his daughter to church with his wife because he wanted to make a better life for her, a better world for her, something like that. If you think Christians are bad, if you think religion is bad, how does it make sense to feel this way? Just asking.
When we found out we were pregnant, we would always just stay up at night talking about what kind of setting do we want to create for her, what kind of environment. And that was a hard conversation for me because I knew that we had to create something better. And I knew that I was not, at that time, the best role model because I was an angry person.
My guy, you needed therapy, okay? So I have had the kids discussion with my wife. They probably are going to happen at some point, let's just say. And we've discussed this. I mean, she's a Catholic, I'm an atheist, I'm a militant atheist. She's kind of like a pretty passive Catholic, but still Catholic nonetheless, maybe a bit agnostic, but still identifies as a Catholic. So we have had discussions on this, and the grand result of our discussions on this has been we are going to expose our children to everything philosophy and religion. We will go to synagogues, we will go to mosques, we will go to fundamentalist churches, we will go to Catholic churches. We'll go everywhere, and we won't let them have a stranglehold on our children, as it were. And on top of that, I mean, we will expose them to every sort of philosophy under the sun. I am a very Nietzschean person, but I also like the Stoics, but I'll tell them every kind of philosophy out there. I mean, we will discuss this stuff. We'll discuss philosophy, theology, scholarship, all of it. Assuming they want to. I mean, they might not want to. They might not actually care at all. But I will try to, give them a thorough education in all of these things, because I believe that a person should be able to decide for themselves which way they're going to go, and in order to do so properly, you have to understand everything that's out there. In a Christian country, you get stories like this all the time, where, it's either you're an atheist or you're a Christian. There's two options, but there's more than two options. There's a whole world out there. Now, would I be disappointed if my kids decided to become a fundamentalist Christian? Oh, hell yeah. I would not like that at all. But ultimately, it's their life, it's their choice. Who am I to say no to something like that? And this may be off-putting from a militant atheist like myself, but you gotta think also, I mean, people get to make their own choices. I can't decide anything for anyone. To do so would be unfair. I don't know what other people need. I don't know what this guy needed, aside from therapy. He did need therapy. A whole lot of therapy, it sounds like.
I always had this belief that God was a changer of lives only for the negative, but I never even thought to think about all the positives that can come from God.
Isn't that kind of curious? I mean, I do not have a very positive view of people who convert to Christianity because pretty much every time I've seen it, they've become worse people. People who weren't homophobic become homophobic. People who weren't transphobic become transphobic. People who weren't anti-feminist become anti-feminist. People who were liberal Democrats become conservative Republicans. I haven't seen a whole lot in the way of good changes in at least those regards. Now, that's to be fair, to be more fair than that. I have seen some good changes. Like, I have seen people quit drugs. Do I think they necessarily needed religion to quit drugs? Well, of course not. But it did help them sometimes. I mean, some people were depressed, found religion, and were no longer depressed. But all of these kinds of stories where, like, oh, I was depressed, I was sad, I was miserable, I hated everybody, and I hated myself. All of these sorts of stories you might notice tend to originate in America. You don't hear a lot of these from Australia or the UK or anywhere it's a little bit easier to get therapy. It's always in America where therapy is a luxury reserved for the very rich that you find these stories. Instead of going to therapy, people just think, well, I need something. Where can I get something for free? Well, the churches. The churches will help me out. The preacher will be my therapist. And that's a sad reflection on the state of our society, I think, more than anything else.
And so I found myself wanting and craving to hear more about it. I started feeling different, like maybe there is something there, and I started feeling differently in my heart, and I realized for the first time I admitted all my faults and that I was a broken person. And I was
Again, therapy would have been a really good choice for this man, and I'm not making fun of him. I'm really not. I understand how he feels. As a teenager, I was really depressed. Into my early and mid 20s, I was really depressed. For my own part, I grew out of depression. I started seeing life in a more optimistic, positive, happy way. My depression was a barrier I built up against sadness in life, against disappointment in life. But I realized at some point that it didn't help me, that my barriers were kind of like hurting me and leaving me oddly exposed. Like the barriers that I set up to protect myself were doing the opposite. They were opening me up to all kinds of negativity and negative things happening. So I set about destroying those barriers to make my life a happier place to be. And it worked. It doesn't work for everybody. Again, depression is very often a chemical thing. And you do need help for that. You need therapy, psychiatry. You need sometimes medications for that. And I would encourage everybody, if they are depressed, to look into that. But some of us do, I guess, grow out of it. Maybe this guy was in the process of growing out of it, didn't even realize it. Maybe it's still there for him, and he's just got it on like a very low level. I mean, there's plenty of options here, but I'm not making fun of him for this. I understand the seriousness of it. I don't want anyone to be depressed. I don't want anyone to suffer depression. I've seen too many people go under because of depression.
wasn't even close to the person I wanted to be. And that's when I admitted to my wife, it's time for me to be baptized, because it's time for me to finally stand up and be the person I want to be, the father, and obviously the husband I want to be.
I don't have a problem with that per se. I mean, if he really felt like becoming a Christian would make him a better person and a better father, sure, go wild. But you might notice something about this video that I find kind of off-putting, which is this. This video is called Atheist Science Teacher Makes This Shocking Discovery Which Leads Him to Christ. What is the shocking discovery? That he wanted to be a better person? You'd think the science teacher angle might play more of a role here. But yet, it's all about feelings, and this is really common. I did another video recently on a Catholic comedian who claims that she used to have been an atheist, and she does the same thing. She rejects scientific and rational philosophical explanations that sounded perfectly reasonable to me, the kinds of things I already think, and then just said, but I felt in my feelings very different. Well, that's fine. I'm not going to say you can't feel your feelings, but I am going to say that I don't think your feelings are the best reason to convert wholesale to a religion. It does make people a lot worse. That Catholic comedian I mentioned, she is anti-LGBT now. She is anti-feminist now. She does have criticisms of the Catholic Church that I found in a very perplexing video of hers, but those criticisms are very shallow, very surface level, not that deep, and kind of underplay the issues with the Church. So I do feel like in a lot of cases it makes people worse. I mean, you become, if you really give in, a doctrinaire, and I've seen this happen with other religions too. I mean, there was this TikTok trend after the October 7th attacks on Israel and Israel's response of people converting to Islam. That trend has fortunately faded, which is good, But during that trend, I saw people really get into Islam, like, white suburban women getting into Islam, the head coverings, learning the terms and all that stuff, um, trying to learn Arabic, and becoming really hateful against like the LGBT community after having previously maybe been like, progressive liberals. So there's always a cause to this stuff. And I think it's really sad when this sort of thing happens. It doesn't have to happen this way. I don't think converting to a religion has to make you a bigot automatically, but it happens way too often. I don't know about this guy, but I wouldn't be surprised if the same thing happened to him as the Catholic comedian who isn't that funny.
I was baptized on Father's Day, and so the fact that it was on Father's Day was unique, was very unique.
No, it wasn't. It was one of the 365 days in the year that just happened to be Father's Day. What's unique about that? People get baptized every single day of the year. I'd say, probably an equal amount all 365 days of the year, or at least fairly equal. I mean, probably around Easter and Christmas, there are more baptisms, I would say.
Unique to me. There's got to be some sort of symbolism there that, finally that I'm accepting my father on Father's Day.
How scientific.
And so now I'm not offending my God anymore. I feel differently in terms of making sure that people understand that there is a God and that I was once them.
But how does science factor into this? Again, this video says atheist science teacher makes this shocking discovery. What's the shocking discovery?
And now I'm a believer and my life is completely different. And just because maybe one Christian ruined it for you doesn't mean that they're all like that.
Again, I know plenty of Christians. It's not that Christians ruined Christianity for me. If anything, I don't believe in God because I can't keep my hair together. But really, I was a natural atheist. Whenever they gave me these, my dad is a preacher, a pastor. He used to be a televangelist, not a very big one, thankfully. My mom is a gospel singer. These people are all about some Bible. And that's the environment I came from, going to church all the time, hanging out in a Christian TV studio all the time. I actually look very favorably upon the studio, but I hate churches. So I was all around religion as a kid. And whenever they gave me these explanations for things like God created the heavens and the earth, or Adam and Eve, or just things like the stories like Noah's flood, or Abraham and Isaac, or Lot, or Job, these sorts of stories, I would just be like, this doesn't make sense, or this sounds bad. Why do you think this is good? Or when they mentioned like the whole resurrection story of Jesus, I remember really I didn't pay attention for a long time as a kid because kids don't pay attention, but I was a pretty perceptive kid. I hate to admit it. I wasn't like a super genius kid or anything, but I was pretty perceptive about certain things other people may not pick up on. So I remember picking up on the Jesus thing. The first time I actually heard and understood the Jesus story, I was probably like 6 or 7. And I just remember thinking to myself, that doesn't make sense. That story makes no sense. Nothing in it makes any sense. No, I didn't have that exact thought, but that was the idea. It didn't make sense to me. I didn't believe it. I didn't buy it. And I couldn't put my finger on why these stories didn't make sense. They just didn't seem to comport with the world that I saw around me. I guess I was born with a naturalist lens, that I look around the world and I see nature, not the hand of God and everything. And so that's pretty hard to like undo in a child. Like if a child is born that way, they're born that way, and there's not much you can do about that. But then later on, I discovered ideas like evolution and the Big Bang, and I thought, now that makes a lot of sense. It wasn't even that much later. I was like 8 or 9, I guess. But I discovered these ideas, and I was like, that makes a lot of sense. That's a story I can get behind. So it's not like I am an atheist because Christians suck. In fact, I think religion does terrible things to people, and I think people's views suck a lot of the time, especially like Christians and Muslims and everything else. But when it comes to them as people, I like people. I like all kinds of people. I really, really love people. I'm a people person all the way through. I got that from my family, at least. I'm a people person. I don't care if you disagree with me as long as you're not like a neo-Nazi or something. They can go to hell. But otherwise, I really like people. And I feel bad for this guy that he doesn't. And he thinks like, oh, if you're an atheist, well, it must be because you just have bad experiences with Christians, which I find is really common.
Wish I would have known that earlier. I just encourage people, don't be afraid of your Christianity. Don't be afraid to help people. Be bold in your faith in terms of you believe, you stand up for what you believe in, and don't be afraid of offending other people.
Don't be afraid to be homophobic, transphobic, and anti-woman. It's fine. Don't worry about it. Jesus loves you anyway. Is essentially what I think this boils down to, but like the persecution complex here is amazing. He admitted that his life as an atheist was a very lonely one, that it was like a very lonely existence for him. And now he's in a Christian church, presumably. He's surrounded by, a country of hundreds of millions of Christians in a world of billions of Christians. So, like, what is he saying? Like, don't be afraid to stand up for your faith. Don't be afraid. Like, why are you afraid? Everybody's Christian. What is there to be afraid of exactly? Are you afraid of me? I don't think I'm that scary. Shit, I hang out with Christians constantly. Um, I don't think I'm that scary personally. So there we have it, folks. That is the story of atheist science teacher. Yes, despite being about an atheist science teacher, you may have noticed science was practically barely never mentioned. And what was mentioned is just, these dang Christians, boy, they sure do grind my gears, my guys. They sure did make me a little bit upset. They sure did, like say things I didn't like, and I didn't like them. And then I went to church with my wife and just like fell in love with Jesus and felt all kinds of feelings, good feelings, and feelings that made me happy because I didn't want to get a therapist. Therapists, ugh. So that's the story of atheist science teacher. And yes, it's very underwhelming, but like not every story can be a banger. I just wanted to cover this one because I found it really perplexing in how it was framed and how this man thinks. And I did like to harp on the angle that yes, so many of these people just need a therapist. Like, just get therapy. And this channel in particular is great for these kinds of stories. I mean, this channel has all kinds of stories along these lines where people just like they badly needed therapy. Like, it's a common theme, but it's always, always, always Americans that have this. It's always Americans because we have a terrible healthcare system where only the rich can afford good things, and the rest of us are just on our own. So I guess when you're depressed, churches, a lot of the time, that's all you got. So that kind of sucks, but what are you going to do? I mean, we are super capitalist, right? Not much we can do about that, apparently. We can't have good things because good things are socialism. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed or didn't enjoy whatever you feel and felt. I hope you felt it. Thanks for watching and have a good one.